So I'm Judy LaPorte. I'm the interviewer. And tell me your name and birthday.
Birth date?
Yes.
No, not birthday, just the year you were born.
Oh, yeah, that's it. That's the birth date. Ellen, formerly Croteau, now Ellen Wassell, and I was born on the Ides of March in 1956.
And with us, we have Leah McBain and Sally Harris. And if they may join in with a question at any point, too.
And let's have, what's the date today? Today's date is
24th of April.
of April, and
April
we're at the
24th.
Newbury Public Library.
Yes, and we're at the library. And if you were born here,
Which I was not.
where were you born?
I was born in Medford, Massachusetts. My parents were living in Somerville at the time. But when I was 3 months old, they carried me up to Newbury like Moses in the basket. And because my grandparents lived here exactly half a mile up the road on 103A. That's where my dad grew up, and his heart was always in this town. And Grandpa had had a stroke, so not a bad one, but bad enough that Dad was concerned. So he called up my grandfather and said, "Do you mind if I move in with the family?" There were 4 of us kids. I was the youngest. And so we moved up lock, stock, and barrel to, right up there on 103A, which is where I spent the next 18 years of my life.
Can you tell us a little bit about your parents? Like, what were their names? Where were they born?
Yep, my mother's name was Ellen, and she was born in the Boston area. She was a city girl. So for Dad to take her out of the city, she had a lot of, she had been up here as an au pair. And that's how Mom and Dad met, because he was a Newbury boy with all of his brothers and sisters up here. Dad was born on Baker Hill. I don't know where up there they lived before Grandpa built this house on 103A. But I know Auntie Alice Lynn, who you all know, she was Dad's older sister. They were all the kids, as far as I know, were born on Baker Hill. I always heard it was in that little red schoolhouse on the corner, but I don't know how that meshes with the history. Like, was the schoolhouse still being in use, or did they live there? I don't know. But clearly there were 8 kids and they needed a bigger house. Where and how Grandpa got the funding to build that house. He built it himself, according to Dad, with Dad's help and the help of all of the brothers. But he was apparently a jack of all trades, Grandpa.
And what was your father? Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to get the genealogy. What was your father's name? First name?
Walter.
Walter. Okay.
Yep.
And what did your grandfather do for work?
I don't know, Judy. That's the weird thing. And until you asked me to do this interview, I got to thinking about that. And I remember hearing Dad say, "Geez, I wonder what all the people in town thought when Grandpa started putting this house up. It's large. If you guys know, you know the house, of course." But he had 8 kids. Don't ask me where Grandpa was really a character. Aunt Alice Lynn. She is his granddaughter. Believe you me, Grandpa was a character. He played the harmonica. He was absolutely wonderful. Speaking of him being the jack of all trades, years ago when I was moving out of Sunapee, and I was cleaning all sorts of things out, I came across Grandpa's business card. Now, why he had a business card, I don't know. He was born in 1886. And when I knew him, he was 70 or something like that when we came up here. And it said Joseph E. Croteau, Iceman. He was the Iceman on the lake, or one of them. And we had a huge shed out in back of our house filled with hay, to
Insulation.
preserve the cubes of ice that he chopped out of Lake Sunapee. That was one of his jobs.
That may
And
have
when we
been
get
really-
around to talking about when I was 18, I'll tell you about the other one. That was really interesting.
And then what did your dad do for work when you moved up here?
He graduated from Northeastern with a degree in accounting. So he was in the insurance business down in Concord all of my life for 30, 40 something years. He worked for the Board of Underwriters. Except when my sister was asked in grammar school right over there or wherever it is what your dad did, you know, you have to say what your dad did for a living. She said he's with the Board of Undertakers. You know, yeah, she was 8. Dad said, "What did you say I was with?"
I didn't realize that your grandfather had 8 children.
Yeah,
I knew, of course, Alice and George.
George.
And your father.
Yeah.
But where did the others all go?
Well, there was Lillian. I think she was the oldest. There were a few that gravitated toward Massachusetts. A couple of the uncles lived in Goffstown and spent part of their time on the coast of Maine because Grandpa had a cottage in Maine, in York, Maine, and they were big fishermen. So,
That's very interesting background.
yeah, they've been all over the place. Oh, and my Aunt Irene, who was one of the youngest, she was a little pistol too. She took right after Grandpa also. She and Alice looked a lot alike, only she had, well, you only knew Alice probably as gray-haired, but Aunt Irene had this huge beehive of dark black hair. And she had the devil in her. She was great. She lived in Massachusetts.
And she is still alive?
No, she passed away a couple of years ago, I think. Before or after Auntie Al, I can't remember.
So what are some of your special memories of this area?
Volumes. I mean, you know, I was blessed having been brought up here at 3 months old because I was the leftover kid, being the youngest, and there were 4 years between each of us. So my siblings, I mean, my brother was in junior high school. My other brother, Bruce, was in high school. My sister was in grammar school. At one point, where is that school? Okay, I have a really bad sense of direction. At one point, 3 of us were in that school. You know, it was a 2-room schoolhouse. And when I was in the first grade, it was grades 1 through 4 in Mrs. Tucker's class, and grades 5, 6, 7, and 8 in Mrs. Cole's class. And my brother Bruce was in the 8th grade, and my sister was in the 4th grade, and I was just coming in the 6th, you know. But before I got to go to school, my mother was busy trying to run the household and try to figure out what the heck she's going to do in the middle of this country setting. And Dad was off at work every day. So I was taken care of by first my grandmother, who they called me her shadow because I was always right at her leg. And I used to help her make bread and donuts in the morning and all of that. And then she died when I was 5. And everybody cried their eyes out, and I laughed at the funeral because I was 5 years old and I had no idea why everybody was sobbing. Then I, just being a child, turned around and grabbed a hold of whoever's leg was closest by, and it was Grandpa. And he really needed me, as it turns out, because he was very, very, very upset about the death of Grandma. And so we became instant friends, really good friends. And he didn't die until I was 16. So that was good. I got a nice dose of Grandpa.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And where did you shop?
Oh. At first, over in Bradford, ironically, which is where I live now, at Vern's IGA.
Yeah.
you remember Vern?
Oh, yes. Just barely.
Well, funny, when I worked at the Lake Sunapee Country Club about 15 years ago, Vern was a big member there. And so I got to re-know him as an adult, and it was really nice.
So did Vern sell it to the Danforths? Is that how that
I
worked?
don't know where that store went because we graduated toward the big city of Newport eventually, and we shopped at the IGA in Newport, which is, I can't remember where that was, out by the DMV or something. I don't know. Well, anyway, I can't remember where it was, but and on daily shopping, it was this charming old trading post. Are you from Newbury, Sally?
Summers, yeah. I remember that mostly for
The trading post.
Yeah.
Every morning, speaking of memories, I loved that place. Arthur and Joe Larson owned it. Sweetest people. We were really good friends with them. We would go down, my brothers and sister and I would go could walk everywhere in this town, and go to the post office, P.O. Box 57 with a little brass dial. I almost remember the combination, not quite. And pick up, and then go through the soda fountain. Remember the soda fountain?
yeah.
And toys hanging on the wall. That's what I remember.
Yeah, but do you remember the year they got a jukebox? It was scandalous.
I remember.
Ooh,
the
boy.
jukebox. I was too young to think it was scandalous.
Yeah. Well, and then we'd walk up 3 creaky stairs, and it was the trading post.
Yeah.
And Arthur would always be behind the counter. And what I remember most about the trading post was he always had animal crackers. You know, the box with a little string. And I always got a box of animal crackers about once a week. And occasionally on weekends, my dad would ask me to go down to the store. This is when I was old enough to walk by myself. So I must have been about 8 or 9. And get him a pack of Lucky Strikes. Can you imagine that these days? You have to show an ID to get cigarettes or something like that now, right? And it was allowed because Arthur was a friend of the family, and he'd go, "Now you're not smoking these, are you, honey?" I was like, "No, I'm not smoking those."
What was the community like? Different than now, perhaps. What was it like?
Well, like I said, when I say blessed, I mean it was one of those old-timey eras where whole families lived in the same place at the same time. I mean, my Uncle George owned the garage, and he was a school bus driver for us for a while. My Aunt Alice lived 3 doors down from us when she moved here from Reading. She was married to Uncle Arthur, who was a wonderful man, but he died, and she moved up here with her girls and had, put up that house. Opened up her own beauty salon in the house, where I got my first haircut. Yeah, and so it was that kind of thing, and then, well, you know this, Judy, because you were one of the neighbors. You were. I mean, it was like you were kind of on the other side of town, but not very far, Eventually, my uncle, George Parker, on my mother's side of the family, and my Aunt Alice, my mother's sister, he was a career Marine. So they'd come and spend summers with us, he and, my 2 cousins, auntie and uncle and the 2 cousins. And then when he retired, they bought the house 2 doors up that way from us.
You had family in all directions.
Who else? I mean, seriously. And Mike and Tookie, well, we always called her Tookie.
Yeah.
I
So
can
did I.
still never figure out where she got that nickname. I thought she was born on the Kentucky or something. I don't know. But I mean, we were all like that close. And then summer people, of course, always come in, and we got to know a lot of those people too. The Bashells moved in across the street from Long Island, and they weren't just summer people. They stayed. When they came, they moved here. And then I had friends down on Shore Drive that came just for the summer who my sister and I got to be really good friends with. And they'd go back to school in September and we'd all cry. But we'd correspond. We wrote letters, which was great. And I still have them all. I kept every letter everyone ever wrote to me.
Somebody else did too.
You do? I'm an archivist.
I know, but I have boxes of archives.
No. We've moved. James and I have moved so many times. And he's like, Ellen, do you really need to? I'm like, yes. Then yes, those are going with me because it's history. I was an anthropology major in college before I became something else. And I was like, it's history. It's archival. I love that. I just love it. What was I going to say about that? Oh, one day, the wraparound porch on my dad's house, we used to have party after party after party there, especially in the summer. We call them hootenannies. Because Grandpa played the harmonica, Dad and my sister played the guitar. Aunt Alice Lynn, I believe she played the banjo.
I knew she
And
played
someone
some
played the
music.
fiddle. I think it was Uncle Ray, Uncle Ray was the uncle right under George. I'm telling you, it was lively. And there was a swinging door, never, ever, ever locked. And, the neighbors would just come in. And then my brother Bob, who was 11 years older than me, he gravitated toward and still does and presently lives back in Massachusetts. Because he only spent until he was 18 up here. Then he went off to college. After college, he went to Vietnam. After Vietnam, he moved to Boston. And to this day, he's living down there. But he made a bunch of friends, not only when we still lived down there, but also through college and all of this. And most of their parents had summer homes up here. So we all got close in that way. And then they'd go home to go back to school in September, but they'd be living literally at our house on weekends to ski. Mom would go, oh, here come the boys. I better put a big pot of something on the stove. And, she was like their second mom. And my sister and I were thrilled because we thought we were going to marry 2 or 3 of them. It was like, oh, he's handsome. My brother was like, but it was that kind of thing. And then I can't let this story go. And I don't know if you know this lady or not, but one afternoon, my sister and I were sitting on the porch doing something or another, reading or whatever, and this woman walked down 103A. This is July, in a long green diaphanous gown, and she had long dangle earrings, a beehive, and huge, round, thick, like Jackie Onassis glasses. And she had a jeweled leash in her hand. And I don't know, so just one at the time, or it might have been 2 huge Afghan hounds. And my sister and I were like leaning over, this is before Dad windowed in the porch. We were leaning over the banister going, what is that? Oh, yes. And she had a cigarette in her mouth, but it was with a long cigarette holder. Diamonds on her hands, the whole thing. And we were like, just gawking. And so obviously she kind of saw us out of the corner of her eye. And she turned around and she goes, hello, darlings. It was Mrs. Garabedian. Did you know the Garabedians? Iris and John. Well, my parents got to know her very quick. They lived in that octagonal house right down on the lake. It's not very far up from the town dock. So the families, we just, like that, got to know them really, really well. She was hilarious.
I was going to ask you if there were any special people here in Newbury that you remembered.
Oh, all of them were. The Donahues moved up, the Vashells, we got to know them like sisters, and, Bob and Judy were, Mom and Dad were really close, and the the Donaghy's who bought Windward Point, and the lodge on the top of the hill at the same time. They were from Winchester, Mass, and they were at first just summer people, I think, but then very quickly moved up here year round. And I'm still friends with their daughter. You know, I mean, it's
And your family were special people.
well, that's for sure. And yes, yes, they were. I feel like blessed to have been born into that family. I mean,
So when you were hanging around with the summer kids, where did you guys go and what did you do?
oh, we spent our all day in the lake like fish.
Where, off the town dock or off your friend's
No,
house?
because again, talk about spoiled. Dad had a dock on the lake right next to the Donaghy's property, right next to their dock. So we had the Donaghy's dock, we had our dock. We had a right of way across a little tiny tip of their property to get down onto the dock. And then the Trudeaus came into town from Newport when I was a sophomore in high school. I used to be the first one to be picked up on the bus. And all of a sudden, sophomore year, I get on and there's this large girl sitting in the front seat in my seat. I was like, who the heck is this? And I thought, oh, she is really in trouble. She's large. Not that, you know, I mean, this sounds terrible, but they called us Mutt and Jeff eventually. And do you know Kathy?
Yes.
Oh, gosh, she's hysterical. She had cat's eye glasses and she was wearing a two-piece polyester knit suit. I was like, she's in trouble. So I went over and I sat next to her and I said, where did you come from? And she said, oh, up there. We just moved into town. And I came to call Uncle Buck, her father, was the caretaker at Wellsweep, at the Stone Barn, the former Hay Estate property, Stone Barn. So
Now, did you go to Simon's? Where did you go to high school?
Kearsarge.
What?
Kearsarge.
Yes,
I walked
of course.
into
You were
Kearsarge,
young.
my class, the door opened day one of that high school.
Ah.
And we were the first graduating class to go through all 4 years at Kearsarge. I loved every minute of high school.
How many people were in your graduating class?
80. Yeah.
Yep.
We just had our 50th, in fact, over at Wadley this summer, and it was really interesting, really fun.
Well attended?
Very well attended. I'd say there were at least 40 to 50 people there, but then one of my classmates got up and read very reverently the list of the people that are dead.
Oh, yeah.
It was really sad. I didn't know half of them were gone. But, you know, you must have heard the stories about that school, no walls.
It was open concept, right?
Yeah.
Loved it. We were all little hippies. We were like, yeah, this is cool. I hate math. So I listened to the anthropology class next door, which is how I got so interested in that subject. I loved it. It was.
Did you take part in the United Nations?
Yes, I was Sweden, as a matter of fact, because there was an exchange student, a foreign exchange student, and he was from Sweden, and I had a bad crush on him. I was Sweden that year. Yeah.
Did you do all 8 grades then, right here?
No, because by the time I got into grade 6, they were starting to try to process the regional high school, and that was coming into the plans. And they moved the people from Newbury that were going into grade 7. There were 6 in my 6th grade graduating class, 6 of us. They moved us up to the middle school in New London, which was a little traumatizing at first because New London was intimidating.
Yeah.
You know, even though my sister and my brothers had gone to high school there, I hadn't. And I was like, whoa, yet again, another big city to negotiate and fit in. And there were a lot of, even back then, you know, wealthy people, kids from wealthy families. But instantly, it was just a really warm feeling where I got to know a lot of people. And
So were you the first class from Newbury to go up there?
I
for
believe
middle
I
school?
was,
You
yeah.
were a pioneer in the schools.
Oh, yeah. Surprised they're still standing. We had fun, though. Yeah.
Did you go to dances at all when you were growing up?
Well, it wasn't my dances. I and everyone else that I know, including my sister, took dance lessons at Jenkins over there in Newport. Yeah, that was amazing. Those are amazing memories. We did that for years: tap, ballet, jazz, gymnastics. David Jenkins would have us on the harness and flip us over on the mat. And, they were great people. But my parents, there was another two families in town, Judy, that I forgot to mention, the Lusts,
Oh, yes.
who owned Lakewood Manor.
Yeah.
And the Pacharkas right next door, who owned Wildwood Cottages.
Wild Goose.
Wild Goose Cottages. So I still see Diane all the time, their daughter. And yeah, so once a week, was it once a week or once a month, there would be a formal square dance over at Lakewood Manor. And what was Mr. Lust's first name? It was Kay.
Kay and
And
Freddie.
Freddie was the caller. And he was really professional about it. I mean, he did a really good job. However, we weren't allowed to be up top and up until my mother died and I was cleaning out her closet, I should have kept it too. It was the uniform.
Weird skirt.
Oh yeah, gingham, blue and white check gingham, then the puffy sleeves and the whole thing. And Dad had to wear this little bolero type thing or whatever. But they had a blast. And downstairs they had a huge, it wasn't a cellar, it was a dormitory, they called it, where the kids hung out while the adults were dancing. And they had mats for us on the floor and blankets because the dancing went on way past our bedtime. But we were given snacks and we got to hang out down there with our friends, and it was like magic. Yeah.
That's great. Were you a member of any group or organization?
No. And it's funny because when I started living at other places and people would talk about the Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts, and they're like, "You were never a Girl Scout? That's impossible. How could it be that you weren't a Girl Scout and you grew up in rural New Hampshire?" And I said, "We didn't need Girl Scouts.
No.
We were in the woods all the time or in the lake all the time. I took junior life saving down here on the town dock. Not that anybody wanted to drown while I was on watch, I'll tell you. I wasn't that great at it. I loved to swim, but I wasn't, I never got to senior, but I
It
took
was
all.
cold at the hour that junior life
Are
saving.
you kidding me? Did you take that?
Yes, and senior. All day.
It was raining every single
And it was
time.
freezing.
And it was freezing cold. And I have always had really bad circulation. I'd come home and my hands would be pure white up to here in the middle of July. And my mother would have to run them under the hot water for me. Yeah, I'm glad somebody knows that. I thought I was just complaining.
Mm-mm.
It was freezing.
It was freezing.
Do I dare ask what your telephone service was like?
Yes, that's, I read all those questions. And I was like, oh boy, these people are in for it. Yes, we had a party line.
How many on the party?
I think there were at least 4, if not 5. And my mother, who was a very charitable person, never said a bad thing about anybody, would go, oh, that one will never get the line. She talks forever. But my sister and I like to pick it up and listen to people's conversations. You can hear people's well, not that I trust cell phones in that respect these days either. I mean, talk about the other extreme. Now they know about us on Mars,
Do you remember what your ring was? Did you have a
Oh,
single ring, a double ring?
I think it was too long. Bling, bling. And I do remember the other nice memory was when we got a private line. Oh, we thought we had made it into the Oval Office or something, you know. It was like, whoa, private line. Bob Wassell across the street worked for the telephone company, and he was a big jokester. And my mother was on the telephone with my cousin Pammy, who was Aunt Alice Lynn's daughter. And I think Pammy was about to get married or something, and they were talking on for hours. And the cord was really long, and Mom was like all the way into the dining room. Of course, it was the phone was attached to the wall in the kitchen, right? Bob Wassell came in, and he looks at me, and I'm standing over at the stove cooking pancakes or something, and he goes, and he takes a pair of scissors and snips the cord into.
Oh.
And my mother kept talking. And finally, she looks down, Pammy, are you Pammy? And she looks down, and the cord's dangling, and I'm trying not to laugh in the kitchen, and Bob's like acting like he's completely innocent. Of course, he had another cord across the street, and he rigged it right back up. But he just had to see what my mother's reaction would be. Yeah.
That's cute. What did you do for an occupation through your life?
Well, when I went to college, I said, let's start. I babysat first when I was 12 to 14. Then I got a job as a dishwasher at the Knollwood Inn. Do you remember the Jaegers and the Knollwood
Absolutely.
Inn?
Mm-hmm.
She was such a good cook. So for one summer, I did that. Then Kathy Trudeau showed up from Newport, and I went to work at Well Sweep with her, picking raspberries for the people that owned the place, the Wassermans that lived in the house, which is Danny Wolf's aunt and uncle.
Okay.
Then I became the Wasserman's maid for a summer, which was fun.
Which meant you did what for them?
Oh, very little. They had a black maid that came up. She was absolutely wonderful. When the two of us got together, we had such a good time. Her name was Pearl, and she knew how to cook. So I was kind of like her assistant cook. And I helped Mrs. Wasserman. She had a beautiful herb garden. I knew nothing about herbs. And this is where I learned to love things like tarragon and basil, and I had never heard of those things. We had Spam and American chop suey in my house.
And salt.
A lot of salt. I still love it to this day. Anyway, and then I graduated. I have to say, I graduated all the way up 103A. Because here's the last job that I had in this town, and you know all about it, is senior year in high school. I had just graduated. 2 days later, I got a telephone call from a really good friend of mine from Kearsarge, and he said, "Hey, do you have a summer job yet?" And I said, "No, I'm not worried about it. I was going to go apply like the next day." And he said, "Well, my mother is the switchboard operator at Colby. And she just had a message through yesterday saying that there's a lady that lives very close to your mom and dad's house that needs a maid and a cook." And I went, "Robert, a maid? I'm not going to be a maid." I mean, I called myself Mrs. Wasserman's maid, but it was more like her house helper.
Yeah.
They didn't call me a maid. I was like, "A maid? You got to be kidding me." My whole goal was to go get a job at the Frost Stop scooping ice cream because that was the cool place to be. Summer people in boats, boys. I wanted to work at the Frost Stop. So he said, "Ellen, for heaven's sake, just go take down this number and call her and set up an interview anyway." And we're like, "Interview? What is an interview?" So I called. I said, "Well, I can't cook." So I called my friend Joanne, whose mother was the head of the lunch program at Kearsarge Regional. And I said, "Joanne must know how to cook." You know, she was a friend of mine. We did shows together at Kearsarge, and she was a cheerleader. And I'm like, "She must know how to cook." I said, "Do you know how to cook, Joanne?" She goes, "No. My mother does all the cooking." So I said, well, do you think you could learn? And I told her about the job, and she goes, sure, I'll come to the interview with you. So Mrs. Hay gave us instructions as to how to get down to the house. So the next day, we drove down all the way to the cottage, which is where she was staying. She said, just keep going down the drive until you get to the lake. So we kept going. In 18 years I had lived in Newbury, that is exactly 2 miles from my dad's house. Never knew it was there, which is the way they wanted it. Never, ever, ever knew it was there. So we drove down and drove into the little mini courtyard that's outside of the cottage, and went in, and I was like, oh, this is really sweet. This is really cute. God only knows what we were wearing. She was sitting on her upholstered couch in a long, beautiful dressing gown. And it was June, and the fireplace was lit, and because it was still chilly in there. And we had an interview. I don't remember too much about it except for her at the end of it saying, and you will be staying. And I said, what do you mean staying? And she said, spending nights, staying overnight. And I said, oh, no. That's not necessary, Mrs. Hay. My dad lives 2 miles from here, and Joanne just lives over in Sutton. We don't need to stay here. And she said, oh, yes, you do. It's part of the job. And we're like, okay, this is a cool house. So I went ahead and I said, I was just out of high school, thought I was the cat's pajamas, because I had managed to graduate and I was on my way to college, and I was like, yeah, I'm cool, yeah. We can work for this old lady. So I said, well, if we're going to stay here, are there bedrooms upstairs? And she said, yes. And I said, well, can we see them? Because I wanted to pick out our bedrooms. So she brings us up the stairs with this quizzical look, which she had for all 4 years that I worked for her. Believe me, I've seen that more times on that lady's face. It's like, what are they doing now? So, we nodded and said, yeah, this is sweet. This is nice. Thank you. And she said, okay, I'll see you the first week of July, which is when she typically came up. So July, the appointed date comes, and she calls, and she said, okay, come on down and I'll show you around the house. And I looked at Joanne and I said, we already saw the house. What is she talking about? Don't ask me what the vegetation looked like at the time, because that house, my husband had to explain this to me when I brought him up there, was set and designed so that it was not seen. I mean, seen from the lake, yes, but seen from, people driving down. No, I mean, you completely missed it the first time we drove down to the cottage for the interview. So she gets in my car, whatever, my dad's car, and we drive up, and she said, okay, turn in here into the courtyard. And we're like, what the heck is this? And where are we? We were floored. I mean, I am telling you, it was like walking through the closet in Narnia or something. We walked in and we're just like, and she showed us through all of room by room, all of the rooms. This is my bedroom. This is where you be serving me breakfast in bed every morning at 8. I'm like, yeah, okay. And brought us upstairs, and there were 4 guest bedrooms upstairs, not including the little nursery at the end. And Joanne and I were all set. She was going to get the room with the butterfly bluebird wallpaper, and I wanted Teddy Roosevelt's room because I loved that 4-poster bed, and green is my favorite color. That was mine, that was hers. We were all settled, overlooking the front lawn. And she said, okay, you can come back in like 2 days and we'll start. And we came back in 2 days and she showed us our quarters.
They weren't overlooking the front lawn.
I'm like, what's this back here? It looks like a hospital. You know? Believe me, if have you guys ever been into the servants' quarters up there?
Mhm.
It's fine, especially for an 18-year-old. And, you know, when I brought my dad in to see it one day when she was out at dinner or something, he's like, Ellen, this is your bedroom? It's full of antiques. There was a bird's eye maple dresser in there and high boys and yeah. And my bedroom overlooked the courtyard. And Joanne's bedroom overlooked the babbling fountain on the front lawn. Yeah, we weren't hurting. So that was my big final job in Newbury, New Hampshire. That is another whole chapter.
I was gonna say, you must have a lot of stories about that.
Seriously. Yeah. Both Mrs. Hay and Joanne and I were all on a really steep learning curve. Because we were little hippies and she was a proper lady. And I had no idea how to be a maid.
Were there
Sounds
other
like it.
people on the staff besides you, or was it?
Al Cathian was the head gardener, and he had younger kids under him. Chucky, don't remember his last name. He still lives right across from the stone barn. He and his wife Nancy, who graduated high school with me, they were at the reunion this summer. He was Al's, assistant, and there was a kid named Tommy that came in from Manchester for the summer. She had a whole battalion of people, whoever was necessary.
Was she patient in teaching you what she wanted you to do?
You know, looking back on it in hindsight, I'd say she was above and beyond the Call of Duty patient. I showed up the first week to serve her. Unless she had guests, she did not eat in the dining room by herself. She ate on the beautiful mahogany, priceless probably, coffee table in front of her big overstuffed couch in the library. Dressed to the nines in one of those dressing gowns. And the first week, I showed up serving her dinner on a tray in my blue jeans, hip hugger, halter top with my midriff showing. Thank goodness I had a concave stomach at the time, and bare feet.
Did she dress you after that, or did she counsel you?
Oh, yeah. About a week later, the package arrived. Al used to come down and get the mail for her every morning in Newbury at the post office. And he'd drop her mail off there was what was called the mail bag in the front hall. It was big, huge. It was literally her horse saddlebag from when she was in equestrian, which she was most of her life. She came out to the kitchen that morning after breakfast and put this big box on the table and said, "This is for you girls." And I was like, wow, really? And she said, yes, you open it at your leisure. So she shuffles off down the hall. And I looked at the package and I said, Joanne, it's from Bloomingdale's in New York City. And I said, she must really like us. We must be doing really good so far. So we opened it and we tore into it, and it was 2 pink and white striped uniforms.
Like a candy striper?
Yeah, precisely like that. And they came right, I either wore maxi skirts, I'm telling you, it was 1974, or a mini skirt up to here. I was a hippie. And I'm like, they cut right there, like right there. And it had little white cuffs with little rick-rack and a Peter Pan collar, and it zipped up the front. And it was A-line. It was the most hideous looking thing I thought I had ever seen it. I went out to serve her lunch carrying the thing, and I said, do you expect us to wear these things?
Oh, no.
Yeah, I'm telling you, she was very tolerant. But we were in those uniforms for the rest of our time there, I can tell you that. We had to learn. We had to learn what she expected. And I ran down the street crying to my dad a number of times, saying, she's so mean. She's so mean. She won't let us do cartwheels on the front lawn. We're just practicing for cheerleading. And she told us one night, you girls have your own lawn out back under that gorgeous tree that got chopped down. But, you know, I went off to college the next year and I matured quite a bit and went back. I couldn't believe she invited us back.
So you went back another year?
Got 4 summers in a row I worked there.
Really?
I was just on the phone with Kathy Trudeau. She told me, I said, Kat, how long did you work there? She was with her for 10 years.
Oh my goodness.
She said she got into her low 90s. Mrs. Hay was in her 70s when I worked for her. I'm not sure about the age there, but yeah, we became what I would call as close as you could probably get to a friendship by the time a year or 2 went by.
Did she have a lot of company?
More and more once she knew she could trust us. I mean, she had us making things like, when she had company, of course, not when she was alone. Oh no. When she was alone, she ate things like consomme right out of a can, you know, 'cause she had a delicate tummy, and maybe sliced tomatoes on a bed of lettuce or something. No, when she had company, she wanted a crown roast of lamb. She wanted, one time we had to make a souffle.
So you had to learn how to make all this stuff.
Yeah. The very first thing Joanna and I did, we snuck into the library, which was probably my favorite room in the whole house. And in one corner, there was a shelf full of cookbooks, and we grabbed the Fanny Farmer cookbook, which is my favorite to this day. I have one. And it was our Bible in the kitchen all summer long, because Fanny Farmer can tell you how to do anything.
Yeah.
But the souffle, darn it, I mean, it looked beautiful when it came out of the oven, and you know what they do.
Yeah.
It looked like a shoe leather by the time we served it to her. And then there was the night that she made us cook a cow's tongue. Yeah.
Oh.
This long, it was sticking out of the edge of the pot. We kept running upstairs to the bathroom. I'm like, I can't do it. We have to slice this thing and serve it to her.
Was that for company?
Yeah. And then I had to learn how to open a bottle of wine tableside.
Oh, correctly.
No correct about it. I'm surprised I didn't break the neck of the bottle. I had no idea how to open it. Creekmore Fath, her son-in-law, thankfully, he was such a sweet man, took it from me and said, I'll finish that, honey. Like they wanted a sip of wine sometime that night, because I was taking like 10 minutes to open the bottle.
So
You
it was
had
a,
I was going to say a real glimpse into how the other half lives. I mean, into a really different lifestyle than anything.
Completely different than, and that's what my dad so kindly explained to me, you know, as I was tears dripping down my face, you know, feeling like an underling. But I mean, I just have to do one more thing about that along those lines. After I got used to it and knew my place and we settled in and everything seemed to fit between what she expected and what we could do, and having, you know, respect for her and dressing nicely and having my hair back in a bun. I even went and bought white nurse's shoes.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm. And so one day in the morning, the routine was always to serve her breakfast in bed, go clear her tray half an hour later. She'd go out and prune her roses, and we'd make her bed and tidy up her room, and I would clean her bathroom. So one morning I was sitting on the edge of her bathtub. This is after I had gone to college for a year. And I was cleaning her bathtub, and I was singing at the top of my lungs, because by that time I was a theater major at college, and we had auditions coming up in September for a musical, and I had to practice. God only knows what I was singing, but the acoustics in there were really good. You could probably hear me all the way down to the lake. She came up to the window. Of course, it was open, screened and open. She tucks her head in, and I'm like, she said, "Oh!" And I almost fell into the tub. I was mortified. I thought she was out there on the front lawn with her roses. She said, "Oh, you sound just like your grandfather Joseph." And I just looked at her and I thought, I said, "You knew my grandpa?" And she said, "Why, yes, he used to, lovely man, he used to come up and groom the horses in the stable every day. And he sang to the horses while he was grooming them." And instead of thinking that was charming, I thought, great. I come from a long line of servants. This is all I could think. I'm like, Grandpa worked in the stable up here?
Wow.
But, and then, once that settled in, I thought, oh, that's really cool. And imagined her as a young woman listening to him singing to the horses. And it was like, that's a pretty cool story. I like that. He was a jack of all trades, I'm telling you. Did you ever meet my grandfather?
I think I did. I think I did. When did he die?
I was 16. I can't do the math. I flunked math, I'm telling you. So, yeah, you may not have because you were busy on the other side of town in your scuba diving suit.
I knew your dad.
Well, Grandpa owned the pit that, the stone faces now.
Oh, yes.
Grandpa owned that whole place. And then he gave it to Uncle George, and then Uncle George gave it to my cousin Johnny Davis. And then Johnny Davis sold it to Perkins. Josh Perkins.
John Davis is your cousin.
Second cousin once removed because his mother Evelyn is technically my cousin, but we always called Uncle Mike and Aunt Evelyn uncle and aunt because they were
so much older,
20 years older than us. And you know how families just sort of do that. Technically, they're my cousins. Yeah.
That is fascinating.
I have a question. May I?
Okay.
So you're a theater kid, it sounds like.
Well, I did theater in high school, and then I went on to switch from anthropology to theater at UNH.
Did you participate in the Lowe family show down at the high school?
No, but Susie Lowe did a show that Tommy Lowe, her uncle, had written called 43rd Street that I was in at the Newport Opera House
a few years ago, right? I remember seeing that.
2 Octobers ago.
Yeah.
Basically playing my grandmother. According to my cousin Pammy, who came to see it, she goes, "I was watching Grandma up on stage." The one that died when I was 5.
Yeah.
Corncob pipe. She smoked a corncob pipe and drank Pickwick Ale. Don't ask me how I channeled that so easily. I don't know, but yeah. So I was in that show, but yeah.
Well, I hate to go back and ask you some dull questions after all that about whether the war affected you or the moon landing, or how did it affect you?
I have memories of those. The moon landing was, we all went down to my Aunt Alice Lynn's house next door to watch it. And I was, how old would I have been? I can't do the math. It was fascinating. And I was young enough to be impressed by it. I mean, I think everybody was impressed by it, but it was like, at the time, my grandfather would sit in his chair in the kitchen and look at the jet stream in the blue sky and say, "Honey, come here, quick, what's that?" I mean, there were no cars when he was born. I think Dad told me he used to take like twice a year his horse and buggy to Boston, and it was, so I remember that very well. It was like this big family gathering, sitting on the floor, eating snacks, watching the moon landing. And I also remember when Kennedy was shot, because I was in the first grade and I was over at that schoolhouse.
Yep.
And I was in Mrs. Tucker's room, And it was going to be lunchtime almost, or something like that. And Mrs. Cole and Mrs. Tucker gathered all the kids and brought them into the cafeteria, and the TV was on, and Mrs. Cole and Mrs. Tucker were sobbing. And we had no idea what was happening.
You were
I
so
had no
young.
idea. I was 6, 7. I had no idea. And they announced that our parents were coming to get us to bring us home. And school was let out for the day. And we were like, what is going on? Had no clue. What else? So, what war? Which one?
And 9/11 with COVID, or 9/11 or COVID?
Well, first of all, I remember Vietnam because my brother sat me down on the front steps. And I was 11, and he was 21 or 22. And he said, I'm leaving tomorrow, Ellen, I might never come back.
Oh my.
And my oldest brother was like a god to me. I was like,
Yeah.
what? Where are you going? You know, I had no clue. I mean, we'd already gone away to college. He was in ROTC, you know, and I was completely devastated. And he was there I think he was there for 3 years because he enlisted. And came back unscathed. It's easy for me to say, but
Yeah.
but I remember the day he came back, my parents threw a big party. The whole town came. Speaking of archival, somewhere in some box, I still have the beer cap. The Budweiser beer cap with a little note that I wrote back then saying, see, even back then, this is the beer cap from the very first bottle of beer that my brother Bobby opened up at the party when he came back from Vietnam.
Wow.
That is precious.
And then I went on, much to my mother's chagrin, to wear all of his army clothes, which she didn't want to see anymore ever again. I wore his combat boots with slippers in them so they'd fit. He had gotten really skinny, and I was a really skinny kid, so I wore his fatigues. Mom was not happy. But that was about that war. 9/11, I was working at the Lake Sunapee Country Club. And I turned on the TV that morning to see what time it was upstairs in my upstairs room at Dad's house. I was living with Mom and Dad at the time. And I was like, what the heck is going on? And then I turned on the TV in time to see the second tower hit live. I was just, oh my God. And my husband, James, at the time, who I was just dating, was on a business trip over in Brussels. And he had flown out of Logan. And I'm like, and I hadn't heard from him because he had just left the day before. I was like, and then I called the country club and asked Doug home, and I said, are we open today? And he said, yeah, get in here. He goes, I know all about it, Ellen, the TV's on. And it was a beautiful day, right? And I drove up Country Club Lane, and it was like right out of a David Lynch film or something. Bright sunshine, emerald greens, people all finely dressed, swinging clubs. And I went driving down that lane thinking, they don't have any idea what just happened.
Oh my word.
And I'm thinking, it was like surreal. And I'm thinking, you know, this is like, you know, half of these people are from New York, are from the cities.
Yeah.
You know, they probably have friends that may even have, oh, yeah. And then one by one, I was bartending that day. They were coming in and had to be told, and they'd look at the TV and go, what's going on there? I'm like,
Oh, wow.
weird. That was bad.
Hmm.
Do you remember the ice storm?
Oh, yes.
What year was that? I was living with my parents that year, too. 99?
Right? I would say right around 97, 98.
It was
99.
99, because I was living with Mom and Dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a Newbury cop came. I can't remember which one it was. I don't think Lee was here yet. And knocked on the door. And he said, "Oh, are you Walter's daughter?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Oh, thank God you're here. Are you living with them?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Do not let your father out of this house." Because he knew Dad. And Dad had to go to the country kitchen every single morning to eat breakfast to see his girls. He said, "Do not let your father out of the house."
And how were you supposed to keep him home?
It lasted for 4 days. Then one morning he shouted up the stairs, "Slim!" He always called me Slim. Get down here, we're going to breakfast. I'm like, "Dad, we're not allowed out of the house. There are trees breaking at the bottom of the trunk and exploding on power lines." And he goes, "Yeah, but I think they have power over there in Newport." We went.
That's a plus.
The poor place was like, it was the first place over the line that had electricity. All the PSNH people were there. All the starving people were there. Everybody was hungry. Everybody wanted like double breakfast, and poor Lisa's running around like going, "Ah!"
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, that was.
Now you have children.
I don't.
You don't have any
I'm
children.
the only one of my siblings who didn't have kids. No.
Can I just ask about your sister? So your oldest brother is Robert.
Yep.
And then there was Bruce.
Mhm.
And then what was your sister's name?
Elaine.
Elaine. Okay.
Yeah.
We went with the EL names.
Well, I asked my dad when I was younger, I said, "How did you and Mom decide to name us?" I was just curious. And Dad said, "Your mother named the 2 boys after old boyfriends, and she named you 2 girls after herself."
Okay.
Because Elaine and Ellen, sorry, Mom, I just had to tell that story. Elaine and Ellen are basically the same, they're a derivative of Helen.
Yeah.
I said, "Yeah, Dad, you've got a point there. Come to think of it, who are these Bob and Bruce characters we never met?" He goes, "You don't want to know."
Are there any local stories or legends that you remember?
Well, besides Mrs. Garabedian and a bunch of other people that I can think of. The Bly, Willie, and
Is this the 2 brothers?
Nathan. No, that's was.
didn't they live in something like a camper or something? Right? I can't remember. They lived on the corner where Birch Bluff. The corner. I can't remember, or it was somewhere
Yeah.
down in this area.
Was it the guys with the horse and buggy that used to come down, or something?
No, that's the Rollins.
Oh, okay.
Rollins.
The Rollins brothers, I remember too.
Yeah.
I think Grandpa was good friends with the Rollins.
Yeah,
I mean, Grandpa went way back.
they were characters too, the Rollins brothers.
They were all. See, Grandpa hung around with all of those characters. According to Dad, way back, Grandpa used to hang tin cans on the tree at the end of our driveway, and when the hobos heard the tin cans tinkle, they'd know that they were welcome to come up on the porch and get something to eat.
I never heard of that. Isn't that nice?
Yeah, he and Grandma were pretty nice.
That's wonderful.
I don't know how Grandma felt about it, but she had to do the cooking. But I can't think of anybody else necessarily in town. I'm sure there were plenty. Do you remember the Shaddocks?
Oh yes, absolutely.
I went to school with, Amos was in my class. I don't think he made it past the 6th grade. I'm not sure. George, he was ahead of
Probably
me.
he was about 16 by the time he finished 6th grade.
Yeah. Dorothy was a very, very nice girl. She was a lot older than me, and I became friends with her. They were financially pretty challenged, but really nice kids. They were.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to add?
Not that I can really think of at the time.
We could go on forever with the stories from.
Well, we could. The Fells is another whole chat. I mean, that's a big.
Do these 2 know that you wrote a book about your time?
I did not know.
I wrote a little anecdotal sort of book called Heyday, which is, the subtitle is A Day in the Life of the Maid. So it brings you from like 7 o'clock in the morning when I got up to prepare her breakfast, all the way through cleaning the house to lunchtime, to afternoons off every day, where I got to roam the property and go down to the lake and all that, and then on into cocktail hour and dinner, and then nighttime, and then bedtime. So, but the best part about this book is that I wasn't supposed to be taking photographs down there.
But you did.
I had a little Instamatic and one of those things that spits out the picture right away. Polaroid. And yeah, I wasn't going to live down there without taking photographs. So I took photographs, and I had a bunch of them. I made a little scrapbook out of my experiences on which this heyday book is based. And James not only looked at the photographs, but also came down there several times. We still go there once a week to either snowshoe or hike. He got a sense of what it was like, and he's an illustrator. So he illustrated the book, I'd say pretty beautifully, in terms of what I told him the place looked like and how he could piece it together from the photographs, and what they've done with it, with placing furniture there now. And
That would be a great book for the Historical Society to have.
I don't know why I never
And-
brought it in
And the
here.
library, too.
I know. I have to have more copies made.
Yeah.
That's why I
love-
was stalling coming in here, because I wanted to bring in a copy of it, but we'll do that another time. Because I have like 5 copies left, and we just moved last November and I can't find them. So yeah.
And they are out of them at the gift
Fells.
shop.
I know, because Paige has been trying to get in touch with me, and I think that's what it's about too. Yeah, I will get on that as soon as I possibly can. They're somewhere in my vacuous barn right now.
When I was thinking how your stories sounded like they could be a great premise of a book, so I mean, glad to hear that you've written something. So.
Yeah, and that was just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. You could write a second one.
Some details I'd like to,
Well, yeah.
maybe leave out.
Sure. Yeah.
But there's a lot more to fill in there with that story, and
Yeah,
nice
sure,
memories.
Thank you for.
Yes, thank you. That was
Yeah.
great. That was really
Yeah.
good. You're a good
This was
storyteller.
fantastic.
Well, yeah, I kissed the Blarney Stone 3 times, so
Yeah. Yeah.
you poor guys.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.